I'm freezing. Let me in, I beg, I'll reward you. The promises of the poor Apache woman. The wind blew through the desert town like an invisible hand, sharp and biting. Snowflakes swirled in the air, sticking to the rough stones of the streets and the dry earth that usually knew only dust and sand. It was the kind of night that made even the bravest souls hesitate, the kind of night where people drew their blankets closer and whispered prayers into the cold. In the distance, the lights of the small town shone dimly, flickering like fragile candles fighting against the dark. Inside most homes, families sat by their fires, eating warm meals or huddling together to chase away the chill. But outside, walking through the cold, hungry and exhausted, was a woman who had nowhere to go. She was an Apache woman, her skin weathered by the sun and wind, her hands rough and cracked from a life of hard work. Her clothes were thin and patched, offering little protection against the winter's bite. A small bundle of belongings wrapped in a faded blanket was all she carried. It had everything she owned, some dry corn, a worn cooking pot, and a few clothes. Her face told a story of suffering and endurance. Her eyes were tired but held a spark of determination, the kind of fire that refuses to die even when life seems unbearable. She moved slowly, her feet crunching in the snow, her breath rising in little clouds that disappeared into the night. Every step felt heavier than the last, but she kept going. She had to. Survival left her no choice. Hours earlier, she had been in the wilderness trying to find food and shelter. The small caves she had sought offered little warmth, and the animals she had depended on for a meal were nowhere to be found. Hunger gnawed at her belly, and cold crept into her bones, settling deep where fire and warmth could not reach. She had thought she could make it through the night alone, but as the darkness grew and the wind cut through her clothes like 1,000 tiny knives, she realized that she could not. The world was cruel, and sometimes survival demanded asking for help, even when pride screamed not to. When she spotted the lights of a small house at the edge of the town, she felt a glimmer of hope. The house was humble, not grand or impressive, but it looked warm. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, disappearing into the night sky, carrying the smell of burning wood and perhaps the faint scent of a cooked meal. Her heart raced as she walked closer, each step a mixture of fear and hope. Fear because she did not know who lived there and what they might do to a stranger. Hope because the thought of warmth and food made her limbs feel lighter and her mind sharper. Reaching the door, she paused. Her fingers, stiff with cold, hovered over the wooden surface. She could hear voices inside, faint and muffled, like ghosts of laughter and conversation. The thought of being turned away made her heart sink, but she could not stop herself. She knocked gently at first, then louder when no one answered. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling from both fear and cold. "I am freezing, let me in. I beg you, I have nothing, but I promise I will repay your kindness." Her words were almost lost to the wind, but she kept repeating them, her voice growing stronger despite the shaking of her body. Inside the house, the family heard the knocking. The father, a middle-aged man with a furrowed brow, frowned and exchanged a glance with his wife. "Who could it be at this hour?" he muttered. His wife, concerned, peered out the window but could see only a shadow moving against the snow. "Someone must be in trouble," she said softly. "It could be a traveler or a poor soul. Look at the snow, it's dangerous out there." The children, curious and wide-eyed, watched from behind the curtains, whispering to each other about the stranger outside. The man hesitated. They were not wealthy, their resources were limited, and strangers could bring trouble. But the woman's words, carried by the wind and tinged with desperation, touched something in their hearts. There was fear, yes, but there was also compassion, the kind that arises when one sees another human being suffering. The father finally opened the door a crack. The woman's face appeared, pale from cold, eyes wide with gratitude. "Thank you," she said, her voice almost a whisper, yet filled with relief. She stepped inside quickly, shaking and shivering, leaving a trail of snow on the floor. Her movements were slow but purposeful. Every step seemed to carry the weight of her entire life. She looked around the small room, eyes taking in the warm fire, the simple furniture, and the family who had chosen kindness over fear. They gave her a blanket first, wrapping it around her shoulders, trying to restore some warmth to her trembling body. Then they offered her hot food, bread, soup, and tea, which she accepted with both humility and relief. She ate slowly, savoring every bite as though it were a rare treasure. Her hands, once numb and stiff, began to regain some feeling, and her cheeks flushed with the warmth spreading through her body. As she sat by the fire, the family watched her closely, noting the lines of hardship on her face, the strength in her eyes despite obvious exhaustion. She did not speak much at first, only murmuring soft thanks. Then, gradually, she began to share her story. She told them of her struggles living alone, of days spent searching for food, and nights spent shivering under the open sky. She spoke of her family, lost to disease and misfortune, and of the small hope she carried with her despite everything. Her words were simple, but they carried weight. They painted a picture of a life that was harsh, lonely, and unforgiving. The family listened, moved not just by her words but by the courage it must have taken to speak them. There was no exaggeration in her voice, no demand for pity, only honesty, the raw truth of someone who had faced the cruelty of life head-on and survived. By the time the night had deepened, the woman was resting near the fire, still wrapped in the blanket, still shaking slightly from the cold but no longer desperate. The family had decided to let her stay until morning, feeling that some kindness must exist in the world for all to survive. They did not yet know the full story, nor did they know the impact this encounter would have on their lives, but in that moment they had chosen compassion. Outside, the wind continued to howl, and snow fell quietly over the desert town. But inside the small home, warmth and humanity had created a small refuge against the cruelty of the night. The Apache woman, once alone and freezing, had found shelter. The family, once hesitant and fearful, had discovered the power of helping a stranger in need. And though neither side knew it yet, this night would be remembered, not for the cold, nor for the hardship, but for the spark of kindness that shone brightly against the darkness. She whispered again, almost to herself, "I will repay you, I promise." And while the family could not yet see what her words truly meant, the night carried a quiet understanding. Sometimes, survival is not just about food or warmth, but about the kindness of strangers, the courage to open a door, and the belief that even in the harshest winter, humanity can endure. The night stretched on, long and silent, but within the house, a fire burned steadily, and hope lingered in the air like a gentle song. The Apache woman slept lightly, listening to the wind but feeling safe for the first time in many nights. And for the family, there was a sense of anticipation, an unspoken feeling that the life they knew might soon be touched by someone extraordinary. The morning sun rose slowly over the snow-covered town, casting a soft golden light on the roofs of the houses. Smoke still curled from chimneys, and the wind, though less harsh than the night before, carried a crisp bite that reminded everyone winter had not yet released its grip. Inside the small house at the edge of town, the Apache woman stirred near the fire. The warmth had seeped into her bones, and for the first time in many nights she felt almost safe. Her eyes opened slowly, taking in the modest room, the fire flickering gently, the furniture simple but clean, and the family that had chosen to show her kindness. The father, still in his worn morning clothes, poured tea into small mugs and set a plate of warm bread on the table. His wife quietly moved about, preparing a simple breakfast of porridge and stew, while the children watched the woman with curious eyes. She had become part of their world in the night, but she was still a stranger, mysterious and different, with stories and ways that were foreign to them. Yet, despite that distance, The family felt a sense of responsibility toward her. She had come to them in need, asking nothing but safety and warmth, and they could not ignore such a plea. The woman sat up, stretching stiff limbs and rubbing her hands together. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper but filled with sincerity. "You do not know what this means to me. The cold, the hunger, it is hard to explain. You have given me life for another day." Her words carried humility, and the family listened, not just to her voice, but to the emotion behind it. There was no arrogance, no demand for reward, only gratitude. The father nodded, trying to hide a smile. "We are glad you are safe. It is difficult out there for anyone, especially in this weather." He paused, studying her carefully. "But you must understand, we do not have much. We share what we can, but our resources are limited." The woman's eyes softened. She understood. She did not ask for gold or jewels, nor did she expect luxuries. All she sought was a place to survive the night and a chance to gather strength for another day. "I know," she said quietly, "and I am not asking for more than what you can give. I only ask for shelter until the sun rises fully, and I promise you one day I will repay your kindness." She paused, her gaze distant, as if she could see far into the future. "Not with money, not with things, but with something you will understand when the time comes. Something that may help you when you least expect it." The family exchanged uncertain glances. The words were strange, almost mysterious, but the sincerity in her tone made it hard to dismiss. The children, fascinated by her presence, began to ask gentle questions. "Where do you live?" one of them asked, eyes wide. "Why are you out in the snow?" The woman smiled faintly, a little embarrassed by the attention. "I live far from here," she said. "I travel alone, trying to survive. My family, they are gone. I have learned to find food, water, and shelter where I can. But sometimes, even the strongest cannot face the cold alone." Her words were honest and heavy with experience. The children, though young, could sense the weight of her life. They sat quietly, their breakfast forgotten for a moment, listening to someone who had seen more than most adults ever would. After a while, the father cleared his throat. "It is not easy to trust strangers," he said carefully, "especially in times like these. You must understand, the world can be harsh. Some people would not hesitate to harm those who show kindness." The woman looked at him, her eyes steady, not afraid. "I understand," she replied. "I have lived through much. I do not expect trust at first sight. But please remember, kindness is stronger than fear. Those who help others may find that help returns in ways they cannot imagine." The morning passed slowly. The woman ate enough to regain some strength, sipped the hot tea carefully, and listened to the family as they spoke about their lives. She was curious about them, too, asking questions quietly and politely. She learned that the father worked the land and traded goods with other towns, that the mother kept the household running and cared for the children, and that the children helped as much as they could, doing chores and learning the ways of the world. There was nothing extraordinary about their lives, yet in the woman's eyes there was a beauty in their simplicity. People surviving day by day, helping each other, facing difficulties with courage. This was the kind of life she understood deeply. As the day continued, the woman moved closer to the fire, trying to absorb every bit of warmth. The family had offered her blankets and a place to rest, but she remained cautious, not wanting to impose. She spoke little, mostly listening, occasionally offering advice or telling small stories about her travels and experiences. Her voice carried wisdom, though it was not the kind learned in schools. It was the kind learned from life itself, from suffering, endurance, and observation. Every word seemed meaningful, not wasted, and the family found themselves drawn into her stories, intrigued by someone who had seen so much yet carried no bitterness. By late morning, the father began to feel a subtle change. The woman was not just a stranger in need. She was someone who brought a strange calm to the house. Her presence, though quiet, seemed to make the family more thoughtful, more aware of what they had and how precious it was. The mother noticed it too. She watched the children interact with the woman, their eyes bright with curiosity, and she felt a sense of hope she had not felt in many weeks. It was as though this visitor, arriving in desperation, had reminded them all of something they had forgotten, that life, even when harsh, could still bring unexpected moments of connection and learning. Finally, as the sun climbed higher in the sky, the woman spoke of her promise again. "I know it may seem strange," she said, looking at the father, "but what I offer is not gold or silver. What I offer is knowledge, understanding, a way to see things differently, to survive when others cannot. One day you may understand why I came here tonight, why I asked to be let in, and why I promised to repay you." The father frowned slightly, unsure what to make of it. "Knowledge?" he asked. "How could that possibly help us?" The woman smiled faintly. "The ways of the land, the signs of weather, the hidden places where water flows even in dry times, these are things I can teach, things that may save lives. One day you will see the value of helping someone in need." Her words hung in the room like a gentle wind, stirring thoughts the family had not considered before. They did not fully understand her yet, but they felt that her words carried truth. There was no arrogance, no boastfulness, only a quiet confidence rooted in experience. And that confidence, combined with her humility, made them feel that perhaps the world was bigger and more mysterious than they had imagined. By noon, the woman felt strong enough to leave. She had rested, eaten, and shared a part of her wisdom. She stood slowly, stretching and brushing off her worn clothes. The family helped her with her bundle, making sure she was ready for the cold outside. "I cannot stay," she said quietly. "I must continue my journey. But I will not forget your kindness, and one day you will not forget mine." The father opened the door, letting her step outside. The snow still covered the ground, but the sun had warmed it slightly. The woman paused at the threshold, looking back at the family. "Thank you," she said again. "You may not understand now, but your choice tonight will matter more than you know. Be kind, be patient, and remember, even the smallest act of compassion can echo for years." She walked away slowly, her footsteps leaving small prints in the snow. The family watched her go, feeling a strange mix of curiosity and admiration. They did not know when or if her words would come true, but they sensed that this encounter, brief as it was, had changed something inside them. The house felt warmer, not just from the fire, but from the memory of shared humanity. The children tried to imagine what it would be like to live in the cold, wandering alone through the snow. They could not picture it fully, but they understood enough to feel gratitude for the warmth of their home and the safety of their family. The mother felt a soft reassurance, a quiet joy that came from having done the right thing. And the father, still watching the woman's small figure disappear into the distance, felt a stirring of hope, a hope that sometimes helping someone else could bring more than comfort. It could bring understanding, growth, and perhaps even survival. As the day went on, life returned to its usual rhythm, but the story of the night lingered in their minds. The woman's promise, strange and mysterious as it was, stayed with them. She had given them more than just gratitude. She had given them a glimpse of something greater, a reminder that life was not only about survival, but about connection, trust, and the courage to open one's heart even when the world seemed harsh. And somewhere in the snow-covered town, the Apache woman moved on, carrying warmth from the house with her, spreading quiet hope wherever she went. After the Apache woman left the house, the family could not stop thinking about her words. The father worked quietly in his small garden, turning the soil and checking the crops, but his mind wandered to what she had said. Knowledge that could save lives, signs of weather, hidden water, how could someone have that much understanding? He wondered aloud. His wife, cleaning the house, nodded silently, feeling the same curiosity and unease. Even the children, playing with sticks and small stones in the snow, whispered to each other about her strange promises. Who was she really? Where had she learned all these things? And what did she mean by a reward that could help them one day? Days turned into weeks, and the woman's visit became a topic of quiet discussion in the family. They could not stop thinking about the night she appeared at their door, shivering and desperate, yet carrying a strange sense of purpose. There was something different about her, something beyond mere survival. She seemed to understand the land in a way they did not. She spoke of reading signs in the wind, predicting storms, and finding water in places no one else would think to look. At first, they had laughed a little, thinking it might just be stories or old wisdom from her people. But the more they remembered her voice, the more they felt a weight in her words, a truth they could not ignore. One evening, the father was checking the sky as dark clouds gathered on the horizon. He remembered how the woman had spoken about reading the weather, noticing small details that could warn of storms or droughts. He thought of her promise and decided to try it. He looked closely at the color of the clouds, the direction of the wind, and even the behavior of the birds. At first, it seemed like nothing, just the way the world moved. But as the days passed, he began to notice patterns he had never seen before. The way the wind shifted before snow, the way the soil smelled different before frost, the way certain plants seemed to lean toward hidden water. Slowly, he realized she had been right. Knowledge of the land and careful observation could make a difference. The family began to apply her advice, little by little. They checked the soil for moisture before planting seeds, watched the sky for signs of storms, and noticed where water might collect even during dry periods. At first, it felt strange, like following the advice of someone who had disappeared into the wind. But gradually, they saw results. Crops survived a sudden frost, and small streams did not dry up as quickly as before. The mother noticed that food lasted longer when they paid attention to the woman's lessons, and the children learned to respect the land, understanding that it gave life only to those who observed and cared for it. Then one day, the town was struck by a problem no one had expected. A sudden drought began, turning the fields brown and dry. The rivers slowed to trickles and the animals grew weak from thirst. The townspeople panicked. Many families had not prepared for such a disaster, and they struggled to find enough food and water. People argued over small resources, and fear spread through the town like wildfire. But the family who had helped the Apache woman remembered her words. They checked the land carefully, following her advice. They dug in areas she had suggested, found water hidden beneath the ground, and saved some of their crops by giving them extra care. While other families struggled blindly, they survived. The mother often thought of the woman during these days. She must have known this would happen, she said quietly to her husband. She gave us more than shelter that night. She gave us knowledge, a way to survive when others could not. The father nodded. Yes, he said. Her promise, it was not about gold or material things. It was about understanding, about paying attention and respecting what the land offers. That is the real reward. The children, now a little older, began to practice what the woman had taught them. They would explore the edges of their property, looking for signs of water or small plants that indicated fertile soil. They learned to watch the sky, listening for changes in the wind or the movement of clouds. What had once seemed like strange stories now became part of their daily lives. They felt pride in learning these skills, knowing they were helping the family survive. They also learned something more important, that wisdom and kindness were connected. The woman had come to them in need, and in return she had left knowledge that could save lives. As the drought continued, neighbors began to notice the family's unusual success. Where others struggled to find water, they had enough. Where others lost crops, they managed to grow something. People started asking questions, curious about their methods. The father, however, never spoke of the woman directly. Her knowledge was a gift, not a secret, but it was also personal. He only shared the lessons she had taught him, the observations and practices that could help anyone survive. In this way, her influence spread quietly through the town, though few knew its true source. The family's respect for the land deepened during this time. They realized that the woman had not just offered survival tips, she had taught them a way to live in harmony with nature. She had shown them that the world was full of signs and lessons if one only took the time to notice. They began to plant crops with care, conserve water, and teach their children the importance of observation and patience. Her presence, though brief, had left a permanent mark on their lives, changing how they saw the world and their place within it. Meanwhile, the memory of the woman continued to feel almost magical. No one in the family had seen her since that night, yet her influence was everywhere. Her voice echoed in the father's mind when he surveyed the land, in the mother's thoughts when she rationed water, and in the children's laughter as they explored the snow-covered fields, learning to recognize signs she had taught them. She had promised a reward, and slowly they understood what she meant. It was not wealth or treasure, it was knowledge, foresight, and the ability to survive in a world that could be unforgiving. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant shades of orange and purple, the father stood outside and looked toward the hills. "I wonder where she is now," he said quietly, "and how many others she has helped with her wisdom." The mother joined him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Perhaps she moves from place to place, helping those in need," she said. "Perhaps her gift is meant to be shared, not kept in one town or one family." They watched the sun sink behind the mountains, feeling both gratitude and curiosity. The woman had disappeared, yet her presence was stronger than ever in their minds and hearts. Time passed, and life slowly adjusted to the drought. Crops were managed carefully, water was used wisely, and the family thrived while many others struggled. They often reflected on the night she appeared, shivering in the snow, and the strange promise she had made. The children grew more confident and knowledgeable, understanding the signs of the land and the importance of patience and observation. Even the townspeople who once doubted began to respect the family's resilience and skills, though they could not explain the reason behind it. And yet, there was still a mystery. The woman had spoken of rewards and knowledge, but she had not explained everything. The family felt that one day, perhaps, they would understand the full meaning of her visit. They did not know when that day would come, but they knew that her lessons were alive in them, guiding their choices, shaping their understanding, and helping them survive in a harsh world. Her wisdom had planted a seed that could not be erased. Every decision the family made, how to water the crops, how to watch the sky, how to teach the children, was influenced by what she had shared. And in this way, her presence continued to shape their lives, even though she had long since disappeared into the vast, cold wilderness. In quiet moments, the father would whisper, almost to himself, "She promised a reward and she has given it." Not with gold or wealth, but with life, understanding, and hope. The mother would nod, thinking of the way their children had learned to observe, to respect, and to survive. And the children, without knowing it, carried her lessons in every step they took across the snow, in every glance at the clouds, and in every small act of care for the land and for each other. The Apache woman had come into their lives in a single night, desperate and freezing. Yet through her presence and her promise, she had given them something far greater than survival. She had given them knowledge, wisdom, and a vision of a life where kindness and understanding could overcome fear and hardship. And though they could not see her again, her reward had already begun to shape the future of the family, and the town, forever. The following winter arrived with a cruel force that no one in the town had anticipated. The cold was sharper than before, and the wind swept through the streets like an invisible army, freezing every exposed surface. The sun rose slowly each day, offering only brief moments of warmth before retreating behind heavy gray clouds. Crops that had survived the drought now struggled against frost, and the rivers and streams that had provided water were beginning to shrink once more. The town, which had grown complacent after the lessons of the drought, suddenly found itself facing a new kind of hardship. Fear and worry spread quickly as families struggled to find food, water, and shelter. In the center of the chaos, the family who had welcomed the Apache woman that cold night remembered her teachings. They had learned to observe the land, to notice hidden signs, and to act carefully rather than in panic. While others rushed and argued, the father surveyed his fields calmly. He knelt and studied the soil, noticing small cracks and changes in color that revealed where water might still be stored beneath the surface. He guided the children to dig carefully in these spots, uncovering small pools of water that would be enough to keep the family's crops alive. The mother carefully rationed the food they had stored, using methods she had learned from the woman to preserve it for longer periods. The knowledge they had received weeks earlier suddenly became a lifeline. While the family worked, neighbors approached them in desperation, seeking advice. "How have you managed?" one man asked, his hands trembling with cold. "Our crops are gone, and our wells are empty." The father, without revealing the source of his guidance, explained the ways to find water hidden beneath the dry soil, the importance of observing the behavior of plants and animals, and the techniques to keep crops alive despite frost and cold. At first, people were skeptical, but as they tried the methods, they began to see results. The family's farm thrived while others barely survived. Slowly, word spread that the family had some special knowledge that could help them endure the hardships of the winter. The children became invaluable in these days of struggle. They remembered the lessons the woman had shared and worked tirelessly alongside their parents. They observed the clouds, noting the patterns of wind and snow. They checked the ground for moisture and water, learning how to judge the land with their own eyes. Even in the coldest mornings, when frost stiffened their fingers and snow covered the path, they carried on, motivated by the wisdom they had received. The family's unity grew stronger, their determination fueled by the knowledge that someone long gone had prepared them for exactly this moment. Despite their efforts, the hardship was undeniable. There were nights when the cold pierced the house's walls, when the rivers ran low, and when the thought of failure weighed heavily on everyone. Yet each time despair threatened, the family remembered the woman's words, that knowledge, patience, and careful observation could protect them even when the world seemed merciless. They adjusted their routines, digging for hidden water, covering vulnerable plants with layers of cloth, and carefully rationing what little food they had. They learned to listen to the wind, to track the snow, and to understand the subtle shifts in the air that indicated weather changes. With each small success, their confidence grew, and the lessons the woman had taught them became second nature. As days turned into weeks, the family noticed another extraordinary effect of her teachings. Animals that had disappeared during the drought began to return to the land that the family tended carefully. Birds nested in the branches that had been protected from frost, rabbits were seen near the crops that had been watered correctly, and small fish survived in the ponds that had been managed with care. It was as if nature itself responded to the family's respect and understanding. The townspeople who had once doubted now began to see the importance of observing and caring for the environment rather than relying only on luck. The father began to realize that the reward the Apache woman had promised was more than just survival. It was the gift of wisdom, the understanding that the land and its resources were alive in their own way, responding to those who treated them with care and respect. He spoke to his family often about this, reminding them to watch closely, think carefully, and act with patience. "She gave us more than a life-saving trick," he said one evening as the family gathered near the fire. "She taught us to live with the world, not against it. That is why we have survived when so many others have not." The mother reflected on the same truth. She remembered the woman's quiet, patient voice as she had shared her knowledge and promised a reward. She saw the value of these lessons in the way their family had endured the harsh winter while others had lost everything. She made sure the children understood not just the practical tips but the deeper meaning, that the world was full of lessons if one paid attention, and that survival required both care and humility. The children listened intently, feeling the importance of every word. They practiced their observations during the day, tested their knowledge, and learned to anticipate changes in the weather and the land. One morning, after a particularly harsh night of snow, the family awoke to discover that the river running near their farm had slowed almost to nothing. Other townspeople panicked, running to the remaining water sources in desperation. The father, however, remained calm. He remembered the small pools they had discovered in hidden spots beneath the ground, just as the Apache woman had taught. He guided the family to these reserves, explaining carefully how to use the water sparingly and efficiently. For days, this hidden water sustained them, while others went without. Slowly, their neighbors began to notice and respect the family's ability to endure. It was during these moments that the family fully understood the magnitude of the woman's gift. She had not simply asked to be let in and given thanks. She had left a legacy. Her wisdom had become a shield against suffering, a guide through a world that often seemed cruel and unforgiving. They realized that acts of kindness, no matter how small, could have extraordinary consequences. Their choice to help her had returned to them not as wealth or gold, but as understanding, resilience, and survival. Even as the winter dragged on, with wind and frost testing their endurance, the family's spirit remained strong. They worked together tirelessly, following the patterns of nature, observing signs, and making thoughtful decisions that kept their crops alive and their family safe. The children became adept at noticing the slightest hints of change, whether it was a cloud formation indicating a storm or a shift in soil color suggesting water below. The mother and father coordinated their efforts seamlessly, their trust in each other strengthened by the woman's teachings. Word of the family's success reached other townspeople, some of whom came seeking guidance. The father shared the practical lessons he had learned, teaching them to observe the land, conserve water, and tend to crops carefully. He did not mention the woman directly, keeping the source of their knowledge as a quiet, almost sacred secret. Yet through these actions, the spirit of her wisdom spread, helping more people survive the harsh winter. One evening, as snow fell gently from the sky, the father stood outside and looked at the quiet fields that had survived the frost. He thought of the Apache woman and the night she had come to their door, desperate and freezing, promising a reward they had only begun to understand. He felt a deep sense of gratitude and awe. "She prepared us," he whispered to the wind. "Not for gold or fame, but for life itself." The mother joined him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Her reward was wisdom," she said softly, "and wisdom is more powerful than anything else. It has saved us and will continue to guide us." The children, hearing this conversation, felt a mixture of wonder and pride. They had been part of the survival, part of the learning, and part of the continuation of her legacy. They began to understand that life was not just about enduring hardships, but about learning from them, observing the world, and using knowledge to make the future better. The lessons the woman had left were alive in every choice they made, every crop they nurtured, and every drop of water they carefully preserved. By the end of the harsh season, the family emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever. Their crops had survived, their water supply had endured, and their unity as a family had deepened. The town, though still struggling, had begun to notice the power of knowledge, observation, and careful planning. And though the Apache woman was long gone, her presence remained in every lesson she had shared, in every strategy the family applied, and in every act of kindness that had brought her into their lives. They had finally understood her promise. Survival, wisdom, and hope were rewards far greater than anything money could buy. The woman's gift had been extraordinary, hidden in the simple act of asking for shelter and returning gratitude with guidance. And as they looked to the future, they knew that the lessons she had taught them would continue to protect and guide them for many years to come. Years passed since the night the Apache woman had knocked on their door, shivering and desperate, asking only for warmth and safety. The family had long since learned the value of her gift, the knowledge she had shared, the lessons of observation, patience, and respect for the land. Yet even as life moved on, her presence remained alive in their hearts and minds. Her visit had not only saved them during harsh winters and droughts, but had shaped their lives in ways they could never have imagined. Each day reminded them that kindness and understanding could have lasting power far beyond what anyone could see in a single moment. The father often reflected on that night. He remembered the desperation in her voice, the cold that had wrapped her small frame, and the courage it had taken for her to knock on their door and ask for help. She had nothing to give, he would say to his children, yet she offered the greatest gift anyone could receive: knowledge, wisdom, and understanding of life itself. He smiled at the thought, feeling both gratitude and awe. He realized that true rewards in life were often invisible, found not in coins or material wealth, but in the lessons, guidance, and courage that come from those we help and those who help us. The mother carried the same feelings, though hers were quieter and gentler. She watched her children grow, seeing them learn to observe, think, and make decisions based on knowledge rather than fear. They remembered every detail the woman had taught them: where to find hidden water, how to interpret signs in the wind and clouds, which plants could signal fertile soil, and how animals could teach them about the land. The mother knew that these lessons had not only kept the family alive during hardships, but had shaped their understanding of the world. The woman's promise had come true in ways they had never expected, and her guidance had become a silent guardian of the family's future. The children, now older and wiser, often spoke among themselves about the mysterious woman who had once appeared at their doorstep. "Do you think she knew we would survive?" one of them asked as they helped tend to the crops. "I think she knew," replied the other. She had seen hardship before, and she understood how people could learn from it if someone gave them a chance. That's why she came to us. They carried her teachings with pride, using them to care for the land, for the animals, and for their younger siblings. They had become observers, thinkers, and learners, applying every lesson the woman had shared. In their laughter, curiosity, and determination, her spirit seemed to live on, guiding their choices even without her presence. The family's farm had grown stronger over the years. They remembered the droughts, the harsh winters, and the nights of fear when the world seemed against them. But because they had listened to the woman, observed carefully, and acted wisely, they had survived when others had not. The townspeople began to notice their success and respect their knowledge, often coming to the family for guidance on how to care for crops, find water, and understand the land. Though the family never revealed the origin of their knowledge, they shared the practical lessons, passing them on quietly and humbly. In doing so, they honored the Apache woman, ensuring that her gift benefited not only their family but the entire community. The mother often reminded the family that kindness could return in unexpected ways. "Remember," she said, "helping someone in need is never wasted." The smallest act of compassion can grow into something far greater than we imagine. They spoke of the night the woman came, of the way she had promised a reward, and of how that promise had been fulfilled in knowledge, understanding, and the ability to survive. The children, though still young in years, began to understand the depth of this lesson. That life was not only about enduring hardships, but also about acting with care, offering help without expecting anything in return, and valuing the wisdom that others could provide. As time passed, the family came to a new understanding of the woman's true gift. It was not merely about survival during difficult seasons. It was about the vision she had given them for life itself. She had taught them to watch, to learn, and to respect the natural world. She had given them the power to anticipate challenges and respond wisely. She had reminded them that the land, the weather, and the creatures around them were all connected, and that life flourished for those who paid attention and acted with care. The family often marveled at how a single act of kindness, letting a stranger in from the cold, had led to such profound and lasting consequences. The town continued to face challenges over the years. There were storms, floods, and dry spells, but the family always seemed prepared. Others struggled, learning slowly through trial and error, while the family navigated difficulties with confidence, using the lessons they had been given. Many wondered why they survived when others did not, and some began to tell stories about the mysterious night when a poor Apache woman had appeared, shaking from cold and hunger, and how she had left behind knowledge that changed lives. Though no one had seen her since, her legacy became a part of local folklore, a symbol of wisdom, kindness, and the power of helping those in need. The children grew into adults, teaching their own families and sharing the lessons they had learned. They carried the knowledge of water sources, weather patterns, and land observation forward, ensuring that every generation benefited from the wisdom the woman had shared. They spoke of patience, understanding, and the importance of observing rather than reacting impulsively. Her teachings became a foundation not only for survival but for life, guiding decisions, shaping ethics, and inspiring compassion in every action. The family never forgot her face, her voice, or the promise she had made that night. It had been fulfilled in ways they could never have imagined, proving that true rewards are often invisible yet more valuable than anything tangible. Even as the father and mother aged, they reflected on the lasting impact of that single night. They had witnessed how a stranger's need could transform lives, and they understood that kindness and wisdom were inseparable. "She trusted us to do the right thing," the father would say, "and in return she taught us more than we could ever repay." The mother would nod, smiling softly. "Her reward is still with us," she said. "In our hearts, in our children, and in the way we live each day." Every time they taught the next generation, they remembered the lessons and passed them on, ensuring that the Apache woman's gift would endure long after they were gone. The family also understood the humility required to truly receive such a gift. The woman had asked for nothing, expecting no recognition, no reward of wealth or status. She had trusted them simply because they had offered shelter in a moment of need. This humility, combined with the knowledge she shared, had created a chain of generosity and understanding that extended far beyond that single house. The family realized that helping others, even in small ways, could have consequences that shaped not only their lives, but the lives of countless others in the future. In the quiet moments of winter, when the snow blanketed the fields and the wind whispered through the trees, the family often felt her presence in subtle ways. A sudden insight about where water might be hidden, a pattern in the clouds that predicted a storm, or the behavior of an animal in the distance. All these reminders echoed the lessons she had shared. Though she was gone, her influence remained, guiding them through challenges, inspiring them to act wisely, and reminding them that life was full of lessons waiting to be observed. The children, now grown, would sometimes gather near the fire at night and speak of the woman. "Do you remember her?" they asked one another, smiling at the memory of the cold, shivering figure who had appeared at their door. "Yes," they said, "and everything she taught us continues to guide us. She gave us more than we could ever have imagined. She gave us life, understanding, and hope." These words, simple yet powerful, reflected the lasting impact of one act of kindness and one promise kept across time. Eventually, the family's story became a legend in the town. People spoke of the night when a poor Apache woman had come, desperate and freezing, asking for shelter and offering only a promise in return. And though she had never returned, her wisdom had transformed a family, guided a town, and inspired generations. It was a story that reminded everyone that acts of kindness, observation, and understanding could create rewards far greater than wealth or fame. They reminded people that the smallest gestures could echo across time, touching lives in ways that were unseen but profoundly felt. Even many years later, when the father and mother had grown old and the children had families of their own, they never forgot her. Every winter, as snow fell and the wind cut through the town, they would tell the story of the Apache woman, of the lessons she left behind, and of the promise she had made. It was a story not just of survival but of human connection, of trust, and of the power of kindness to transform lives. They understood fully now what she meant by a reward. It was not something that could be held in the hand, but something that lived in the mind, the heart, and the choices of those who had been touched by her wisdom. In the end, the family realized that the night she came was more than a moment of desperation. It was a turning point. Her presence had changed their lives forever. She had shown them that survival required more than strength or luck. It required observation, understanding, patience, and above all, kindness. And through the generations, the lessons she had shared continued to guide, inspire, and protect them, proving that even the smallest act of compassion could have an impact that lasted far longer than anyone could imagine. The legacy of the Apache woman endured, not in wealth, not in fame, but in the knowledge, wisdom, and humanity she had left behind. And in that quiet, snow-covered town, every time a family member looked at the fields, watched the sky, or felt the wind on their face, they remembered her. They remembered her courage, her promise, and the gift she had given them, the gift of life, understanding, and hope.